For today's video, I'm going over the setup process of the TraceLabs OSINT virtual machine on 3 different hypervisors. I'm going to be covering VirtualBox, VMware Workstation Player, and VMware Workstation Pro. So let's start off with VirtualBox. Alright, so over here at VirtualBox, we have multiple different options. We have new, add, export, import, quite a few different options. I'm going to be showing you the simplest way on how to get started with the VM, and this way you're not going to have any hassle with installing it at all. It's just going to be a quick add and import. So the way we're going to do this is through the pre-built virtual machine that it comes with TraceLabs GitHub page. And so we go to the github.com/tracelabs/TL OSINT VM releases, and you want to select the VirtualBox one. You want to click that, download. By the way, it is 1.94 gigabytes, so depending on your network speed, it'll take quite a bit of time. So once that's downloaded, you want to come out of here, you want to right click here, make sure you have 7-zip installed, by the way. If you're on Windows 10, this menu will already pop up. If you're on 11, you have to do show more options. 7-zip and extract here to this directory right here. This will then expand it out into this folder. Now what you need to do is come over to VirtualBox Manager, select Add. This will then open up a selective virtual machine file for you to open. You want to click Desktop or wherever you've put it, open up the directory and just double click on VBox extension here, which should be the only one showing. So double tap that. There you go. That's just imported the virtual machine settings and the profile. A couple of things that we're going to change in order for it to perform a little bit better is we're going to go to settings quickly, and we're going to go to system. Now the minimum requirements are already set with the VM. It's 4 gigabytes and 2 processor cores. If you have a computer like mine or which has 32 gigs of RAM, 6 core, 12 thread CPU, or you have something that's very similar or higher than this, then I'd recommend you increase it, because then what happens is that you get better performance, you get a little bit more leeway with your VM as well, and the VM will only take what resources it needs. It won't consistently use that 4 gigs of RAM or those 2 cores. If it doesn't need it, they won't be allocated. It's just a way of allocating the maximum and minimum, basically. It's a similar thing to a computer. It's literally the same as a computer. You have 32 gigs of RAM, but your computer doesn't use 32 gigs of RAM unless it needs to. So that's the same thing with a virtual machine. So the general rule of thumb is everything that's allocated should be half of what your system is. So I have 32 gigs of RAM. I'm going to allocate 16 to this virtual machine, which in my case is 16384. It will be if you half it to 16 gigs. I have 6 processors. Going over to the processor tab, I have 6 processors, so I'm going to allocate 3. Now that's half of my processor count. I do have 12. I do have 12 threads. Sorry. Which means that I can bump this up to 4. I bump it up to 4 because then I have 2 cores to mess around with, a couple of other threads, all the rest of it. But you can see that if I allocate 4 processors, it's quite even as well. That's another thing, but it's just nicer than having 3 there. So 4 core system is normally what it would be, and it makes the VM act a bit more natural. So once we've done that, we're going to click OK, and we can then start the virtual machine. On the side here, it will say powering the VM up, and then it will bring up a window. Now, if you've used VirtualBox before, you'll know these steps, but I just like to reiterate them just in case you missed something, or if you're completely new to virtualization and you have no clue what I'm on about whatsoever, then just follow what I'm doing and you'll end up getting a screen in no time. Now, if, for example, that you have no idea what I'm talking about, you have no idea what a virtual machine is, I'd recommend go research it first. I'd recommend go research what type of platforms, or hypervisors is what they're called, which is what VirtualBox is called. It's a type 2 hypervisor. Okay, it runs on top of an operating system. So I'd recommend you research it before coming back to this video, and then maybe deciding if you want to use VirtualBox or VMware. So the pre-built virtual machine has a username of OSINT and a password of OSINT. We log in. I'm going to maximize this as well. So I'm going to click maximum, just maximizing the window, and it will automatically resize that in the virtual machine for me. Everything works out of this pre-built VM. Everything works. Everything's up to date. Actually, that's a lie. It's not up to date. So if you went to your terminal, typed in sudo apt update, and then the password is OSINT, it will update the mirrors, and it will give you around 815 to 820 packages to update. This isn't TraceLabs. This is Kali Linux, which is what it's based off of. And so, yeah, 818. So Kali is notorious for its amount of packages, okay? I don't know whether I have NeoFetch installed. No. I'll install it anyway. This will tell me how many packages are installed on Kali alone. You'll notice that there's quite a few Kali mirrors here. Mirrors are essentially just the way is how the operating system grabs packages, dependencies, everything it needs for what it needs to do. So NeoFetch here shows me I've got 1,755 on DPKG. DPKG is just a package, a compile program, which, wow, that's quite a few actually. I thought it was a little bit less than that, but no, we've got 1,755 packages. So there we go. We've now got everything installed. Everything's working. The next thing you would do is you would go sudo apt dist-upgrade tag y, and this will upgrade the distribution. This will upgrade everything that you need. And that I'm not going to do this because this will take absolutely forever. However, if you're going to use this operating system or this virtual machine as a OSINT option, you want to make sure this is all upgraded before you even start doing anything, because if you found any errors before you update, then after updating you might have found that's corrected the error. On the flip side, however, if you find an error after the update and you use the program before the update, you could potentially be open to problems with the kernel and also with the packages. It's very important you update the system. Every person who's used Linux will tell you update it before you do anything else. All right, so that's one thing. So now that we've gone through the basics of the post installation or the post setting up, we're going to actually close out of this now. And I want to show you just a couple of settings around VirtualBox, things that you may want to watch out for, and also things you want to check for as well. So RAM and processor count we've already done. Those are the two major ones. Those are the ones that help the performance of the virtual machine massively. So we're going to go into settings, and I'm just going to show you a few things around. So if we click advanced, you can see there's shared clipboard and drag and drop. These two are really interesting. So if you wanted to copy something from your host machine into the virtual machine, you can do it with these settings because it's bidirectional. So it means that it can happen from the VM to the host machine or the host machine to the VM, either way, right? And same thing with clipboard as well. If I was to open up the VM, I'm actually going to do this. So I'm going to show you this in real time. So I'm going to open up Notepad real quick, and I'm going to open up like the VM as well, sorry. And I'm just going to say like this is a test for bidirectional clipboard. And I'm going to Control A, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to copy that. Okay, I'm going to minimize out of this, and I'm going to wait for this to load because this is quite slow. Don't get me wrong, VirtualBox is a great platform for beginners, but it can be a very slow system in time. Because this is loaded already, it's going to take a little bit faster. So I'm just going to say OSINT. OSINT should automatically resize. Perfect. So just to make sure, I'm gonna go and right click, copy this. I'm gonna go to my text editor, right click, paste. There you go. This is a test for bidirectional clipboard. All right. And if I'm gonna change it here, I'm gonna say this is a test, for example. I'm gonna right click, copy that, paste it. Very useful, especially if you needed a little bit more power and you needed to use your host machine for anything. Put it in your notes. Very, very good. And the same thing with the drag and drop as well. So if I wanted to say, for example, I save this file, I'm going to save it on my desktop, and it's just going to be called, this is a test.txt. There you go. I'm going to close that out. I'm going to drag and drop that in. Double click. There you go. It's just very powerful. This is one of the features that I do like with VirtualBox. I do like this bi-directional thing. I think other platforms do it, but I just like the seamless thing with this. And this is the reason why it's such a popular hypervisor to get started with, because the ease of use is fantastic with it. Okay, so coming out of the VM now is just shut down. And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm not going to tell you how to install it through an ISO. If you do want a video on that, just comment down below. But I'm just going to show you the easiest install and setup process that you can do. Going back to settings, display, you also always want to make sure this is at 128 megabytes, the maximum on the slider. If you don't, your display and your smoothness and everything that you've just saw will be 10 times worse, because the default is 16 megabytes. So you want to bump that up to 120. Make sure it is at 120. If it is, just leave it, but there's that. You also have EFI as well. It's only in cases such as like Windows. If you're going to virtualize Windows, EFI is the one that you'd use. You can use it with Linux. I mean, there's not really much point. But if you were to enable EFI, you can enable Secure Boot, and that is what would be allowed for Windows 11, stuff like that. You'd need that for Windows 11. You also have stuff like chipset, pointing device. All these things are just little nooks and crannies, things that you can test out yourself. You see TPM, you got V2 there, that'll be for Windows 11. But you can just play around with all these settings. Like I said, this is a virtual environment, so you don't have to worry about anything corrupting or anything like that, because you can just spin up another one and be done with it. Another recommendation I'd like to make also is within the user interface, you've got show in full screen seamless. I turn this off because typically this is what shows at the top screen. And if you're going to go like that and you want to select an application maybe, that's going to get in the way. So I tend to turn that off. And then I tend to turn this bottom tray, I think it is, off as well. So I tend to just, status bar, that's it. I turn that off as well. The reason why I turn those two off is so that I have a smooth experience within the virtual machine, and it feels like I'm actually using a proper operating system rather than just a program that displays it. So those are my recommendations, and that's VirtualBox pretty much done. Actually, we're pretty much done with VirtualBox. This allows you to really get hands-on with the virtual machine, and it also allows you to get ready for the next capture the flag, or CTF, whatever you want to say. Right, we're going to move on to VMware now, and that one's not going to be as complicated either. That's going to be probably simpler than this. Actually, we've got most of the settings there are set very, very well, so we're going to go and head over there right now. Alright, so we're over here with VMware, both Workstation 17 Player and Workstation Pro 17. I'm going to show you with the pre-built, and I'm going to show you how to download the pre-built zip file, extract it, and then we're going to import it into both of these. I'm going to save the time and put both of these in together because I don't see the real need to separate them to get at separately. They're both very similar, just Pro 17 has a few extra settings that we can change. Going back to their GitHub page, and instead of clicking VirtualBox, you want to go down to VMware. You'll get a 7-zip file worth 1.91 gigabytes. Again, depending on your network speed, that'll take as long as it takes. After that's then downloaded, I always download it to the desktop. You want to right click, show more options. If you're on Windows 11, again, this will come on Windows 10 by default. 7-zip, extract to TL OSINT, whatever, right, that path. And that'll extract to a folder on the desktop. This folder is what we're going to be using to import it into both of these hypervisors. The way we do that is very simple. Just go to open a virtual machine. And from here, I would like to select desktop, and we're going to select the VMware version. Double tap this and select VMX. This is the virtual machine configuration file. This will then open in Workstation 17 Player. It will say a couple of details here. It will say OS Debian 10, version Workstation 8X, and RAM is 4 gigabytes. Doesn't give you a lot of information. If I were to edit the virtual machine, however, it does give me a few more options. As you can see, we have options under here, and we have hardware. So like I was saying earlier, memory is 4 gigabytes, sorry, but the processor count is 2 more in VMware than it is in VirtualBox. This is more appropriate setting, I think. I think this is much better, having 4 cores and 4 processors. Sorry, 4 processors and 4 gigabytes of RAM. I really can't speak. So that's a more realistic approach. Obviously, like we said before, I have 32 gigs, so I'm going to half them both. Oh, not the cores, I'm going to add 4 cores. And I'm going to try accelerated 3D graphics just to experiment a little bit. And this is really what you want to do as well. You really want to experiment with these hypervisors because, like I said, they're virtual instances, right? You can easily spin another one up. And the whole idea of using a virtual environment is there's nothing connected to your host machine other than just files, right? And they don't overwrite anything on your host machine. So if anything goes wrong in the virtual instance, you just wipe it and then grab a new one. It's very convenient, very easy, and it's just much better to test things. Like with VirtualBox, we're just going to play the virtual machine. It's a bit different than VirtualBox. It actually opens inside the window that you were using beforehand instead of opening a separate one. And you can see this is more appropriately resized on its resolution, more like an actual computer. The reason why this has got more features is mainly because it's got much of a better backing than VirtualBox has. VMware is an enterprise level company, right? Their whole task is to bring enterprise quality to a consumer level with these two programs, right? VMware Workstation Pro is meant for more the people who do virtualization every day. You know, it's a key component with all those different settings and everything to use. Again, no change in the username and password, both OSINT. All right, and it loads up pretty quick actually. It's much quicker than VirtualBox. I'm not slating VirtualBox here. I'm just saying that VMware is a little bit quicker in terms of what it does, right? And that's can be good. I mean, if you're doing like penetration testing, it's very good. But stuff like OSINT work, the performance doesn't really matter too much. The only real thing is that it works. Yeah. So again, if I type in sudo apt update OSINT, it'll go out to its mirrors, it'll connect with its servers, and it will come back saying about 818. I think it was last time. Was it 818 or was it 805, 808? Or was it? I can't remember. It will tell me now. 820 for this one. So you can actually view it if you wanted to here by doing app list upgradable. Again, like I said with the VirtualBox one, I'm not going to do that. But it just gives you a nice sort of interface for you to use this with. And it works relatively well. So I'm going to shut down this virtual machine. You'll notice though, if I shut this down, it exits the whole application. You're going to have to reopen it again if you want to use this. But going back to the settings, we're going to select the VM. We're going to select edit virtual machine settings. And here you can play around with a few things. So accelerated 3D graphics, I'm going to turn off now. Sound card automatically detects and it connects on power on. You can specify a sound card if you like. I don't tend to specify much on the sound side of it. I mean, if it works, it works. And I'll try and find a reason if it doesn't work. USB controller. If you want to use USB 3.1, you can pass it through. I'll get to that. You've got network adapter, which is NAT at the moment, which is just used to share the host's IP address. So it uses the hosts as its own, just like on top of it sort of thing. Your CD, DVD, IDE. This is just your physical drives that would be used. So if you were to use an ISO image, you could put that in there and then browse for it. Your hard disk, like you said, just goes through your hard disk there. Just kind of shows you what's going on. You can defragment the files and consolidate free space, kind of like the defragmentation thing on Windows. You can expand the disk capacity, which is really nice. And you can also go ahead and reclaim some unused ones as well, that's really nice. I like the fact that they've got all those options there. Hell of a lot more than Windows itself does. Tell you now. If we click options, you've got a couple of other things. For example, you've got VMware tools, which synchronize the guest time with the host. It uses application default, which is currently updated manually. You can update automatically as well if you like, but that's not really necessary. You also have access control. So if you were to encrypt this, it'll ask you for a password. And then once you try to open it, it'll ask you for a password. Really good if you're doing sensitive stuff and you don't want anyone else knowing about it. You also have shared folders as well. These are basically expose your files to programs in the virtual machine that may put your computer and your data at risk. Only enable shared folders if you trust the virtual machine with your data. So disable this normally. You want to disable that normally. Okay, and you just have general stuff here like enhanced keyboard and just a couple of other stuff like working directory. But apart from that, that's really much it on terms of the Workstation 17 player. We're going to click OK now, and we're going to just exit out of there. With Pro, it's practically the same. You just got a few different buttons. Open a virtual machine, go to your desktop, VMware, here, VMX. Imports it the same. You can see you get a hell of a lot more device information, right? This is just a hell of a lot more. But you can see my settings saved from the previous one, so that's quite nice. But you can see upgrade this virtual machine, and you can upgrade it to whatever you want. So you can upgrade it to the hardware compatibility of Workstation 17, right? We can then say, as you can see, there's compatible products with Fusion and 17X. Your limitations has 128 gigs, 32 processors, 10 network adapters, 8 terabytes, and 8 gigs of shared graphics memory. Realistically, not going to worry about this too much. If you click next and create a new one, or after this, whatever, you're not really going to worry about that too much. That's only if you've gone from one to another, from Workstation Player to Pro, it'll ask you to upgrade it. There's one tweak, and this is one that gets missed quite a lot. In Pro, you can edit virtual machine settings, go to options, advanced, and down here where it says side channel mitigations, check that. And then what you can do, go back to hardware, display, accelerated 3D graphics, and then just click OK. Now the accelerated 3D graphics will be mitigated by those mitigations from Hyper-V. Okay, Hyper-V Windows enabled hosts will use Hyper-V as a way to try and get more performance out. But the reason why it doesn't work is because Hyper-V is technically considered a Type 1 hypervisor, meaning it's inbuilt with the operating system, and therefore that's the reason why you get so good performance out of Hyper-V. It's because it's inbuilt, it's a Type 1, right? And other programs try to use that Type 1, but because this is a Type 2, connecting on a Type 1 level is pretty much impossible with Type 2, right? That's the reason why it's hard. Again, same thing, OSINT. If I could type it correctly, it'd be lovely. So OSINT again, should load up pretty quick. If I were to expand this, it then expands to the size. Open up a terminal window, and there we go. If we do a sudo apt update, it remembers it because it's the same virtual machine. Everything else, you can see 820 packages. Again, not going to go into that. If I just show you quickly, I'm going to go to home. Oh, sorry, let me go to preferences. That's not preferences. The VM settings, there we go, that's what I wanted to find. If I go to options, advanced, side channel mitigations are not enabled for Hyper-V enabled hosts, right? That's a mouthful. I'm going to actually close out the VM. I'm going to go to virtual machine settings, options, advanced, hover over this. If I do this, enabling side channel mitigations may cause performance degradation. Christ, I can never really say that. Yeah, just enable it. It'll get rid of that, and also you get a bit more performance. All right, so that is VMware Workstation, both Player and Pro 17. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to go down, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. And if you do any more questions at all, maybe for anything more specific, don't hesitate to message me on Discord. I'm quite active in the community. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this helps you in clarifying a load of different things with the VM. And I'll catch you guys in another video. Take care.